Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Rachel and I am knitting. Not right now, but most of the time, and I have been knitting, so I'm going to tell you all about it. Today's video is the next installment of my FO Diary series, or Finished Object Diary series, which is a video series where I walk you through my process knitting a certain pattern and ultimately whether or not I would recommend this pattern for you. So in today's video, I'll be telling you all about this beautiful item here. This is the Lento sweater by Jonna Helin. Now, I've got a lot of notes about my experience knitting the Lento, but I'm going to start off with a quick overview of the pattern itself. So just kind of the pattern stats. So if you see me looking down, I'm simply looking at my notes. So as I mentioned, this is a pattern designed by Jonna Helin, and it was originally published in Laine Magazine, issue 11 in May of 2021. I know that there's a lot of conversation around the sweet spot of pattern length, meaning the actual physical page count that a pattern takes up. This is only a 5-page pattern. So if you want a pattern that is straight and to the point, this might be a good one to check out. It only covers the span of 5 pages. Also great for you if you are a hard copy pattern follower. I basically follow all of my patterns digitally on my iPad or my phone, depending on what device I have closest to me. But if you prefer to print out your patterns and you're always on the hunt for a pattern that doesn't take up too much space, check out the Lento. This calls for 1 strand of fingering weight yarn and 1 strand of lace weight yarn. The lace recommendation in the pattern is a Surrey, and that is what I used for this Lento and also another Lento, which I'll show you shortly. But you could certainly swap that out for a different lace weight like mohair if that's your preference. The pattern calls for a US size 6 for all of the ribbing, so the collar, the sleeve cuffs, and the hem of the body, and then a US size 10 for the main fabric. So it is quite an open gauge pattern, which has the great benefit of making it knit up rather quickly. But also I'll tell you, despite this open gauge, it is still quite warm. Like, I'm getting kind of overheated wearing this for this video, so I'm gonna try and keep my equilibrium as I tell you about this pattern and not overheat. It is quite warm. Let's see, what else do you need to know in an overview? It comes in 9 sizes, ranging from finished bust circumference of 38.5 inches to 67.25 inches, and that's with an intended 5 inches of positive ease. So if you're anywhere from a 33.5 inch bust to a 62.25 inch bust, you can knit this pattern with the recommended ease, and you'll be knitting according to pattern. Of course, you don't have to knit with the recommended ease. The FO Lento that I'm wearing right now has 2 inches of positive ease, so it is not the ease as written in the pattern, but I'll tell you more about that as we continue. The gauge written for the pattern is 15 stitches over 21 rows, being 4 inches. So there's your overview of the Lento, most of your need to know information. Now that we have that all addressed, I would like to pivot to my stats and my process of knitting this pattern. So as I've already alluded to, I do have a second Lento that I have to tell you about. The one that I'm wearing is actually my second Lento. This is the one I most recently made. And this blue one here I started in December of 2023 and I finished in January of this year, 2024. So I'll give you my stats and my overview for both of these, but really I'll be walking you through the process of this pinkish purple version that I'm wearing today. So for this purple version, I knit the size 5 and my finished bust circumference is 53 inches. I'll put a picture up so you can see what this purple Lento looks like when I'm wearing it and standing up. This is with 2 inches of positive ease, as I've mentioned. This blue Lento that I made first is a size 6, so it's a size larger, and the finished bust circumference of this Lento is is 56 inches. So this is with the recommended 5 inches of positive ease, and equally I'll put a picture up here of me wearing this blue Lento so you can see how it fits. So the purple Lento, we will have 2 inches of positive ease, and the blue Lento, there's 5 inches of positive ease. So you can see how the two fit a little differently, with the blue being a bit more oversized. With these final measurements, my gauge was closest to pattern with the size 6. My gauge was about 14.8 stitches over 4 inches for the blue Lento, whereas for the purple Lento, my gauge was around 14.3 stitches over 4 inches. So there's just some overview over here. But now that we've addressed the fact that there are 2 Lentos in existence, and you can kind of see the different fits for the different sizes, at least on my body, I have a 50 to 52 inch bust, depending on the day. Most recently, as yesterday, I measured at 51 inches. So that's where I'm getting those figures for 2 inches of positive ease on the purple Lento and 5 inches of positive ease for the blue Lento. All right, now let's talk about the process of knitting the purple Lento. This was an extremely quick knit. I cast this on May 29th, and I cast it off on June 20th. A few days later, on June 24th, I added 2 lines of elastic to the collar just to cinch it up and make sure that it was hugging my neck a little bit better than how it originally was as written in the pattern. There is a bit of a neck issue for my preference. I don't like my garments underneath the knit that I'm wearing, whether that's a t-shirt or a dress. I don't really like them to be visible. I prefer this cinched neckline look, so that's why I added the elastic. But I'm getting sidetracked here. From May 29th through June 20th, this was on my needles. However, that in and of itself is a very quick timeline for a finished item. For a garment, for a plus size garment, it's just multi-layers of being impressive how quickly this pattern knits up. So less than a month that it was on my needles, but it was on hold for nearly 2 weeks. I brought this with me when I traveled to visit my sister earlier this summer during the month of June, and like 1 day into my trip, I lost yarn chicken for the fingering weight yarn. So this was on hold for nearly 2 weeks, 13 days. So from May 29th, when I cast on, to June 20th, when I cast off, I was only actively knitting on this garment for 14 days. That's quite an impressive timeline. So if you're looking for a relatively quick knit, add this to your list. Okay, so let's talk about the order of events. Well, I guess first I've omitted an extremely important detail, which is the yarn that I used to knit this purple Lento up in. I held 1 strand of fuzzy peach fibers, fingering weight yarn in the colorway Wild Berry. Here's the cake that I have left of it. And then I also held a strand of Dusty Yarn Co. This is the colorway called Cousins, and it's on Dusty Yarn Co.'s classic Surrey base. This yarn was gifted to me by Audrey of Dusty Yarn Co. because she saw my project plans and knew that I was searching for a perfect purple to pair with my fuzzy peach fibers yarn to make a Lento. So she did send me 3 skeins of this classic Surrey base to make the Lento. Now you'll see that I'm holding 2 cakes up, and I'll talk a little bit more about the yarn and the yardage that was used as we continue through the FO diary. So just steel yourself, we'll get to it. Okay, so here's the order of events. As I mentioned, I started this on May 29th. So I cast it on, but I nearly immediately realized there was an issue with the increases. The way that this construction works is you cast on with a provisional cast on. Does it call for a provisional cast on, or did I just modify that? It does call for a provisional cast on. So the construction is thus: you cast on with a provisional cast on, you knit the collar double the length it ends up being, and then you fold it over on itself, knit together your current row with the provisional cast on to seal the neckline, and then you begin your short rows and raglan shaping. Now, when you're doing the raglan, the increases are misaligned. So this is an error in the pattern. If you do plan to make the pattern, you need to go knowingly, be forewarned. The left shoulder increases become misaligned because after you join the provisional cast on with your current row to make it a double folded collar, you immediately begin the short rows. There's no delay. You immediately begin short rows. Now, when you are making the left shoulder raglan increases on both the front and the back, you are doing the increases on the wrong side of the fabric, as opposed to doing an increase on the knit side and then purling a row and then another increase on the knit side. For the left shoulder, the increases are done on the wrong side through purl front back. Because of the nature of that increase, it changes where the increased stitch lies on the fabric. So for the portion of the increases that are done during the short rows, there's a misalignment happening where there's a jog where the increase line sits. So you won't notice this until you complete the short rows and you continue on with your raglan increases. And with a keen eye, you will see that there's just a tiny, like less than an inch portion of your raglan increases on the left side, both the front and back, I believe, of the left shoulder. I'm pointing to my right shoulder right now, but it's the left shoulder that is the issue, if I remember correctly. Let me fact check myself. Yes, it is the left shoulder. Okay, so, yeah. Now, does this affect the structure of the garment? No, it's purely aesthetic. So you can still make this garment as written to pattern without having an unwearable piece. You'll just have a tiny section of your left shoulder increases that are misaligned. If that doesn't bother you, you know, steady on. Go ahead, cast this on, knit it according to pattern. You'll still have a wonderful wearable piece. If it does bother you though, make sure that you read through the Ravelry projects, search for the phrase misaligned increases, and that will bring up a lot of different projects who have project notes addressing this issue. So basically on May 29th, I had cast on the collar, finished the collar, begun the increases, and there's some Surrey floating through the air. And I noticed there was this jog in the increases. So what I did was I laddered down and I fixed the increases so that the jog was no longer happening. And when I was doing this, I was remembering the first time I made the Lento and thinking, I think something like this happened then too. So I looked back at my first Lentos project notes, and sure enough, I had talked about this in my project notes, but I had attributed the error to myself. I didn't think that it was a problem in the pattern, but now after knitting it for a second time, I was realizing, like, Rachel, you're smarter than you think. This wasn't a you issue, this was a pattern issue. So I searched more projects after that to see who else was having this issue, and turns out it was a widespread thing people were experiencing. So that was validating. Definitely a story of success with using Ravelry for the betterment of the knitting community. But yeah, so I realized this issue. Also, after I had laddered down to fix the jog, I realized that that was not a solution that fixed all of the issues, because now my section counts were off. They were off, I forget what they were, but basically it moved my marker along with fixing the jog so that my front section was uneven with my back section, and my left arm section was uneven with my right arm section. So I had to do some creative increasing to make sure that all of the sections were corresponding with the other, or like with its partner, to make sure I was moving forward with the correct stitch count. I also remembered the first time I knit the Lento, that blue Lento, once I got to the cast off for my or once I got to the hem on the body, I believe, I realized that my numbers were off. Like one sleeve had one more than the other, and my body turned out had an odd number of stitches instead of an even number of stitches the whole time. So that also makes sense. It was due to the misaligned increases, because with this knit, I did also ladder down and fix the increased jog, but I didn't realize that my stitch count was off in terms of the number of stitches per section. So that's why this Lento has one sleeve with one more stitch than the other until the hem ribbing, basically, and why the body of my blue Lento has an incorrect stitch count all the way through the body until the hem. So interesting. Yeah. So anyway, that was all on May 29th. I realized my mind was blown. There was an error in the pattern. I had redemption. It wasn't me that botched my blue Lento. It was a pattern error. Okay, so then June 1st, we're in a new month now. I split for sleeves. So that's like, what, 3 days later? Very quick yoke. By 6/4, I finished both sleeves, and by 6/6, I started the body ribbing. So really, within 1 week, I could have had this done. Really? Is that true? That is nuts. Or almost within 1 week. So I knit 60 rows on the body before I started the hem ribbing, and at this point, I am visiting my sister. So I begin the hem ribbing. I get about 4.5 rows in when I run out of my fingering weight yarn. So when I traveled to visit my sister, I brought my Lento work in progress, but I forgot to bring the third and final skein of each base. So addressing the yarn I used, I had 3 skeins in total of this Fuzzy Peach Fibers yarn, and I had 3 skeins in total of this Dusty Yarn Co. Surrey yarn. By the time I went to visit my sister, I had the first 2 skeins of each of these bases wound up and incorporated into the project. I ran out of the fingering weight yarn with about 10 rows left of the hem ribbing, since I didn't bring that final skein with me on my trip. It was a project put on hold, put on hiatus. On June 20th, 2 weeks later, I returned home. I wound up my 3rd skein of the fingering weight yarn, and I continued knitting. The pattern calls for 14 rows of hem ribbing. I was halfway through row 13 before I ran out of the Surrey weight base. So I did end up winding all 3 skeins of each base, even though I have a considerable amount left. And let me tell you how much I have left. So of this fingering weight yarn, the Fuzzy Peach Fibers, I have 98 grams left. Now or 97 grams. I'll tell you that I didn't weigh this skein after I caked it up, so I don't know what the starting weight was. Even though the skeins that we purchase are labeled as 100 grams, I found that typically it's more common that I get skeins that are like 107 or 110 grams. So I wouldn't be comfortable saying that I only used 3 grams of this fingering weight yarn, but certainly it's a negligible amount, regardless of whether it's 3 grams or 13 grams. Not a lot, a very small percentage of this skein. Now for the Dusty Yarn Co., these are 50 gram skeins, I believe, yeah. And the final weight of this cake is 51 grams. So you see what I mean about how the starting weight is not always the same as what's labeled. So I don't know how much of the Surrey weight or the fingering weight that I used from these final 3 skeins. I really wish I had, had my brain screwed on to say, I need to weigh these before I incorporate these into the project, but I don't have a time machine, and if I did, there are bigger fish to fry than going back to weigh these skeins. But negligible amounts. if I had changed my knitting of this pattern, even if I had done a few less raglan increases to make the armhole a little bit shallower, or if I had made this slightly more cropped, I could easily have made this a 4 skein project using 2 skeins of the lace weight and 2 skeins of the fingering weight. Easily could have done that. So I'm not going to say that I regret anything with that, but it is something to consider for my next Lento, which, yes, I do plan to make many more Lentos in my future. Okay, so June 20th, I wound up the last skeins that I needed. I finished it. I added the sewn bind off, and then on June 24th, I added the elastic to the neckline, which maybe you can see. I added 1 line here at the top of the collar and then 1 line here at the base of the collar, and that just helps cinch up the neckline. So like I said, you can't see the shirt I'm wearing underneath or the dress I'm wearing underneath. It's just a nice clean look in my opinion. So yeah, a really, really quick knit. All right, now that we've talked about my timeline of making this pattern, let's talk about some things that I wish were different in the pattern. I've already mentioned the issue with the increases. I think that this is a very glaring issue and that really needs to be updated. So I hope that the designer is aware of this and maybe making efforts to change or update the pattern. There are over 2,400 project pages on Ravelry, and as we know, not everyone does or can use Ravelry, so presumably there are many, 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 many more projects out there in the world, more people out there in the world who have knit this pattern other than the 2,400 plus project pages represented on Ravelry. So it's a popular pattern. A lot of people have made it. It would be great if the pattern were updated. The second thing that I wish were different in the pattern, which is maybe, I don't know, petty, maybe it's not a big deal and I need to just get over it, but as you're starting the project, one of the last pieces of instructions for the collar is to add stitch markers. Okay, so here's what it is. On the first page of the pattern, when you're still on the collar, it's when you're joining the provisional cast on to the live row and you're sealing the collar shut, essentially, the instructions are, while you're doing that, to also place your stitch markers to signify your sections. So a stitch marker for your raglan sleeve, your raglan sleeve, your raglan sleeve, your raglan, like 4 stitch markers to separate your sections. You're supposed to do that in the same action as sealing the collar. I'm sorry, who is placing stitch markers while they are resolving a provisional cast on? Not me, not me. So for me, I just did it on basically after I completed sealing the collar, resolving the provisional cast on, then I went back and added stitch markers retroactively, but certainly not while I was resolving the provisional cast on. Absolutely not. So I didn't really like that instruction. I thought that was not intuitive or like reflective of, I don't know, common sense. I don't know. How does your brain work? Would you do that? Is this a silly thing to, I don't know, disagree with? I don't know, but I didn't like it. And then also, as I mentioned, things that I wish were different. This is not with the pattern, but with my knitting of it, I wish I had maybe omitted a few raglan increases or made the body a little shorter, so I would not have had to wind up the final skeins of each base respectively to finish this garment. So ultimately, the last thing I need to tell you is whether or not I would recommend this pattern for you. And that is a resounding yes. I think that this pattern is very easy to follow, misaligned raglan increases aside. I feel like if you know about that issue and you go knowingly and you have a plan in place to address it, or not, maybe you don't care about it at all, like, go forward. I support you. Do what you want to do. live your life. But yes, I definitely recommend this pattern. I think it's an extremely wearable piece. It's so cute, and I think that it's a wardrobe staple. It's very comfortable. I feel good in it. I think I look good in it, and I'm very happy with it. I do plan to make several more. Looking at my yarn wall, I'm not sure if I would use anything on my yarn wall because many of these skeins have projects that I already have planned and, you know, bouncing around my brain, but I do kind of want to stash dive to find more combinations that I can make fun fabrics with this pattern. So it's a quick knit, it's easy to follow, it's straight, it's to the point, only covers the span of 5 pages as I mentioned, and since there are so many projects on Ravelry, you can certainly search through and look at examples of people who have your same body type or who are using yarns that you prefer and see how this project works up. Having a pattern that has so many projects is just like, it's like dessert. It's like such a joy because there are so many resources available to us as makers to sift through if that's our preference and if we'd like to kind of gain the knowledge from the people who have gone before us. So I definitely think this is a great pattern. It's fun, it's relatively easy. Like if you are a beginner knitter and you're looking for your first pattern, make the Lento. Don't even worry about the issue with the increases. Just make the Lento according to pattern. If you're using the recommended yarn combination, a fingering weight with a Surrey weight, the halo, the fuzz of your Surrey weight, your lace weight, is going to be pretty forgiving. It's going to help hide that jog in the increases. So yeah, try the Lento. If you want to try an open gauge garment that will knit up relatively quickly, give this one a go. I'm really, really happy with this finished object. I really needed a win. I've had a few garments that just don't fit right. They're not my style. They're not my preference. So to have this off my needles and on my body and feel good wearing it, I needed it. I'm just so pleased, and I definitely recommend this pattern to you. Thank you so much to Audrey of Dusty Yarn Co. for providing me with the lace weight yarn for this Lento. I think it worked out so beautifully, and I'm really grateful to you for providing yarn support. If you're not familiar with Dusty Yarn Co., give them a follow. They have some beautiful colorways located in Southern California, I believe Southern, definitely California, if not Southern California. And thank you also to Leslie of Knit California for destashing the Fuzzy Peach Fibers yarn. Your loss was my gain, and I'm so pleased with the finished result. So if you're a plus size knitter also, going back to whether or not I recommend this pattern, and you are you know, buying yarn for garments is cost prohibitive for you, try the Lento, because like I said, with a few modifications, I could easily have squeezed this garment out of 4 total skeins, which is nothing to turn your nose up to. 4 skeins is a steal for a garment for a plus size maker. And I'm just so pleased. So definitely check out the Lento and let me know if you make one. All right, that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to check out my other FO diaries, you can head over to the FO diary playlist and look through them, or let me know if there are any other patterns you'd love for me to review. I am definitely open to it, and I'm excited to continue making all sorts of things. So that's all I have for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you don't already, and hit that notification bell to be notified of my next upload. Last but not least, head over to Instagram and follow me at Rachel is Knitting if you don't already. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.